In the last lecture, we talked about the science of emergence, and now we're going to talk about, perhaps to your surprise, how this concept is also relevant in mission and in theology. So, just review briefly the concept of emergence and talk about emergence in mission, the idea of emergence in sin, and emergence in revelation. So, one aspect of emergence is that it leads to a stratification of reality and distinct academic disciplines. And that's why we can draw this hierarchy or this strata of going from physics to chemistry to biochemistry to biology and psychology. And so at each level there are distinct phenomena, concepts, theories, and techniques. So here a couple of questions you might consider, and that is, what's the relationship between a local church and the culture in which its members live? How does the church influence the culture, but also how does the culture influence the church? And these can be in good ways and perhaps bad ways. And so how do distinct expressions of a church emerge in different contexts? And this issue is addressed in detail by a very nice book by Dirksen and Dierenus called Seeking Church, Emerging Witnesses to the Kingdom. And so they consider empirical studies of Jesus' gatherings among Hindu and Muslim background believers in South Asia and somewhat East Asia. And they bring in the concept of emergence from the social sciences, and they talk also about the theology of church, biblical metaphors of the body of Christ, the people of God, and the community of the Spirit. And so they argue that church is an emergent entity. A church is, they say, a dynamically cultural situated emergent reality that's formed under multiple influences. And they say an emergent approach analyzes the relationships between different people and groups and what that interaction in turn creates. And they draw on work particularly by Christian Smith, a prominent sociologist in the USA. And they say that social emergence is, quote, the process of constituting a new entity with its own particular characteristics and capacities through the interactive combination of other different entities. And so a new entity is the idea of I am, because we are. And then there's a dependence on the parts, and they relate this to the body of Christ. The body of Christ, as in the church, is composed of many members, which are different, but they interact to produce a new entity. And so there's new characteristics, new properties, and also new logics. And they talk about relational goods, relational evils, relational logics, and then there's some idea about constraining contradiction and competitive contradiction. So just giving you a flavour, that would be great for you to read more of the book. It's some of the reading to consider how those concepts may be helpful for you in your mission. And then finally, I'll just talk about two other aspects of where emergence has been discussed in theology. So a recent book from Oxford University Press, The Emergence of Sin, and talking about cosmic tyrant in Romans, and this is based on a PhD by Matthew Croasman at Yale University. And so we might ask, what is sin? Is sin an act by an individual, or is it a human condition? Is it unjust structures in society, or is it a cosmic force? Or is it all of these? And particularly, though, what does the Bible say? And particularly if we look at Romans. So, the author draws on this passage from Romans, from chapters 5 to 8, where there's extensive discussion of sin. And so he says that sin struts on the stage like a personal being. And if you look at the Greek noun, it's actually used as the subject of an active verb 11 times. And this Greek word exercises dominion. It sees opportunities to produce covetousness and to kill. This sin revives, and it acts in place of the human agent in whom it dwells. And so the important question is this a literary personification, or is it person identification? Is it saying like sin is a person, a cosmic force? And so is it sin, small s, or sin with a capital S? So he uses emergence, the ideas of emergence, to address this issue. And you can see how that there's all three elements of sin. That sin is an individual, is present in an individual. It concerns the actions of the individual, but also it's a collective phenomena in society, and it can be viewed as a cosmic force. So the third point I want to make about the relevance of emergence is about how it's relevant to theology. And so I published an article about 10 years ago entitled Emergence, Reductionism and the Stratification of Reality in Science and Theology, and looked at certain parallels between science and theology. And one of the things that I make the case that theology is an autonomous discipline. That is, just like physics is autonomous, and chemistry is autonomous, psychology is, it cannot be reduced down to something else. Theology can't be just reduced down to anthropology or sociology or psychology or even physics. But and there are parallels with the perspective of Karl Barth, who was the most influential theologian of the 20th century. And one of the ideas here is ontology determines epistemology. And that's, in a sense, the way things are. That is, the nature of an object determines what we can know about that object. So the nature of God determines what we can know about God, and God has to reveal himself. So let's conclude. So I hope you've got a flavour of how emergence can help us understand how different expressions of church emerge in different social and cultural contexts, how there are multiple dimensions to sin, the individual, the corporate and the cosmic, and how theological concepts such as revelation are irreducible. And now we'll next look about how we can take some of these ideas about emergence and use them to respond to some of the criticisms of Christianity.